Okay, so it looks like we're right on time, 3 p.m. Eastern Time, noon Pacific Time. Joanne, do you want me to get started? You want to wait a few more minutes?
Let's go ahead and get started to make sure we have time for questions.
Okay, perfect. So, hey everyone, for those of you that don't know me, my name is Manisha Patel. I'm a staff member at AATCC. I work in our membership department. Welcome everyone. I just have a few house rules that I want to go over for this meeting, and then I'll let the California section take over and get started. So, of course, when you're not speaking, please just remain on mute. We'd love to get to know you all, so if you can introduce yourself in the chat, that'd be great. If you have any questions or comments or want to say something during the presentation, just please wait for a pause point. And we welcome questions out loud, through the chat, raising your hand, however you feel comfortable. Just a note, you probably see on your screen that this meeting will be recorded. So if you do not wish to have your face or your voice recorded, just feel free to remain on mute and turn off your camera. You can still, of course, communicate via the chat function. The recording will go on the AATCC website behind our member portal. So it is not open to the general public, but it will be accessible to members only. And with that, I will let the California section get started.
Thank you, Manisha. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. I also have a few slides prepared. And just to introduce myself, my name is Dr. Joanne Brush. I am the acting chair of the California chapter as of right now, and we're really excited to be here today. It's one of our first webinars we've had in quite a while with this chapter specifically. So we wanted to kind of reinvigorate our members and really kind of give a big overview of what's going on in California, where some of the research fronts, the policy fronts, infrastructure situations. So just to get to know each other, like Manisha said, let's go ahead and put your name and organization and what you do at your company so that as the speakers and I continue, we can kind of cater our discussion and some of our questions relative to what's important to your job and your role at the company you work for. So just as a reminder, the board members that are for the California, so I work for the California Product Stewardship Council. We have Farhan Patel from Board Writers and Stephanie Ritten from Levi's. If you ever have any questions about what the chapter does or what the association does, you can always reach out to us individually, or even the national chapter can give you our contacts as well. So we have 3 speakers today. So I'm going to lead and just kind of give it a little background on what the Product Stewardship Council does and some current legislation that's happening specific to textiles. But then we're going to move on to the rest of our guest speakers. And we have Rebecca Burgess from Fibershed joining us today and Crystal Moodywood from Materievolve. And we're really going to talk about, the overview of the California textile industry, the supply chain, and some of the research that's happening here in California that's relevant to textile chemistry and coloration. So feel free to add your questions as they arise into the chat. So once the other speakers take charge, I'm going to be monitoring the chat and I'll be the one fielding the questions. So if it's a clarifying question, I might kind of jump in and ask the speakers to clarify real quick. But if it's more of a discussion question, we're going to hold those to the end. So we should have it timed out to have about 15 to 20 minutes for question and answers at the end. But feel free just to type your questions out as they arise. So just an introduction of the nonprofit I work for, who's supporting my time right now and my active work with the AATCC. We're here in California and we're a publicly funded nonprofit from cities and counties, public works, and their solid waste authorities. I personally have a PhD in textile economics with 14 years teaching at UC Davis in the Department of Textiles. So as I crossed over from academia into advocacy and my role at the nonprofit, We're really looking to expand waste recovery and material recovery programs in a way that's, efficient and works for the industry and ultimately isn't paid by garbage rates. What we found with a lot of the past products, especially in our garbage streams, is, you have to have source separated streams to keep these materials clean and segregated. And so textiles has been identified quite a long time ago as one of the top materials that would benefit from a source separated stream. So our work at CPSC is to help develop programs that are administered locally or statewide to really support the textile circular economy and specifically getting diverted textile waste back into the supply chain. So we accomplish this through education, presentations, we do webinars often, we present all over the world. We do advocacy, we sponsor legislation, we track legislation, and we do pilot projects. So I'll talk a little bit about each of those really quickly, but I do want to give a shout out to our advisory committee. We have a textile specific advisory committee that is really engaged with the policy recommendations that CPSC is going to start making and our role in textile policy. I do want to give a quick shout out because we are at the end of our legislative session. So in the next week, all the bills that are active here in California will be either passing or dying. There were 2 textile specific legislations this year. One of them is SB 1187. CPSC provided the expert testimony. And what this bill does is basically provide state funding for the County of Los Angeles and the County of Ventura to do a pilot project for textile repair, textile recycling, textile redesign. So if it passes, which it actually made it all the way through the legislative part, so now it just needs the governor's signature, then that money would likely flow to the county next year. What's really exciting about this bill is that it had unanimous support, so not a single no vote, which means the Republicans voted yes, the moderates voted yes, and that shows that they understand that textiles is a really important material stream and that it deserves some attention and funding. The second bill that's going through is a little more controversial, but this is AB 1817, and this is a bill to ban the use of perfluoroalkyls in all textile products. This builds off a previous legislation that was banning the PFAS from children's products. They also banned it in foodware. So this is the next iteration of a product-specific ban on that use of chemicals, which would give companies until 2028 to start phasing out the PFAS. There were some recent amendments, actually just yesterday. This bill did kind of reduce the thresholds from the 2029 limits, which was 10 parts per million. They also added a few exemptions. So things like aircraft textiles, in addition to, automotive textiles, architectural textiles, those are exempted from this product, from this bill. So this bill has one more step to go before it heads to the governor for signature. There's a third ordinance that's going on that might be relative to many of the people on this webinar, and that's that the City of Los Angeles has proposed an extended producer responsibility program for commercially generated textile waste. And what extended producer responsibility is basically having the companies who are bringing textiles into that market to co-fund the recovery of those materials. This alleviates a lot of the cost burden off the LA sanitation and the actual garbage program, and actually gives companies the front row driving seat to design the program and to control these materials so that they can divert the materials back into their products. So the goal is actually, sharing the funding and to keep it industry run as opposed to government run. But the goals of all three of these bills are really to kind of build out these gaps in our infrastructure. And when we talk about textile circularity and we talk about what we want from a future textile industry, in state, domestically, or even internationally, we have to acknowledge the gaps in the infrastructure and what we want and what we want to see out of a system that prioritizes reuse, redesign, and recycling over landfilling. So that's what CPSC does. We do a lot of education, so you can follow us on social media, you can get on our listservs, and we always are, transparent in sharing our information. So our next speaker is going to really give a little more detail and a little more history on what we talk about when we say, the in-state industry or the in-state infrastructure. So from Fibershed, we have Rebecca Burgess, and she's going to be taking over the screen and sharing her information.
Thank you, Joanne, so much. I'm really honored to be here, and I'm delaying my presentation for a moment as I figure out the screen share. So we can do a window here. While that's happening, I'll start with just a little anecdote about the history of California textiles, since we're, specifically I'm going to be presenting about a very region-specific vision. And there were 12 vertically integrated wool mills in California that people don't often think of California as having a textile industry. And those vertically integrated mills did everything from collect bales of freshly shorn wool to wash, to card, comb, spin, knit, weave, and do all the cut and sew. And imagine literally 12 of those vertically integrated mills dotted across the landscape. I'm just sending this to you now, Joanne. And
Manisha said you could try again. She might have changed the settings.
Oh, okay, great. I'll try again. And what happened again, this was in 1892. In 1893, the Trans-Pacific Railway line was completed, and the labor in California was primarily at that time immigrant labor, as we can imagine. It was a mix of Irish, Chinese, Japanese, and yet in the Southeast, by 1893, they were still, coming out of, well, it was really the end of the highlight of the Reconstruction era, and some of the old, oldie moldy ways of handling the economic racial divide in the Southeast was still at play. Wages were very suppressed in the Southeast for the African diaspora, and so the goods coming into California through the Trans-Pacific Railway undercut the prices of the 12 vertically integrated mills in California. By 1894, those mills were gone because wages were so low in the Southeast due to the inequitable conditions of workers in those regions of the US. So what I'd like to just say about that anecdote is that we could say now that, well, that's just the way the world is, and that's the way textiles have gone, and they'll continue to do that. They'll continue to go to the parts of the world where it's most efficient economically to get business done, with the externalized costs of social equity and environment. Now, I know it's not, it's not 1892, but we have seen similar motifs and themes recreated throughout the industry throughout time. And so I think the question we have now is, with the inability to continue to externalize those costs of social equity and environment, we've hit massive thresholds that society is changing psychologically, but our industries and our business models need to catch up in many ways. Some have, some still have a ways to go. And so I think that's the positionality in which I would meet you today in this conversation, is what is a vision for the future, where all of our skills, all of our processes and thinking and technical acumen can be applied to a new vision for our business models, with a future that includes some level of decentralization to allow rural communities to participate more, to not be squished at the bottom of the value chain as raw commodity producers, to envision a world where diverse ways in which people learn and interact with the world have a place in the job market. Not everything is, going one direction. We still need a multiplicity of industries and a multiplicity of livelihoods. So just wanted to invite, that is the platform, and I'm going to try to share screen one more time. Otherwise, I'll narrate the current work. So Fibershed, I'm here today based off of the support of my organization, which is a 501c3. We work on building regional and regenerative fiber systems, primarily in a 51 county region in California, but we have 54 affiliate communities nationally and internationally who are also building up their fiber systems and natural dye systems from the grassroots up. And so what does that mean? It often means farmers, ranchers, small manufacturers, people who are, let's see here. And so anyway, people from the region themselves asking, how can we work together to produce our second skin, our textile culture? And the interest is really in keeping skills alive in communities and allowing skills to be passed down generation to generation. And so again, these are grassroots response to a system that feels opaque and somewhat distanced from daily life. What I'll say about the work that we're doing in California, specifically to the contemporary reality, is Fibershed's built a 180 member network of ranchers, processors, designers, community members who in some way, shape, or form could be investors, philanthropy, private investment. We have been working on developing fiber pools. For those of you who aren't aware, California is the largest wool producer in the United States. I don't quite know what this year will bring, but in the recent history, we've been one of the largest extra long staple cotton producers in the world. So we are a heavy raw material provider, but we have been historically pretty low on vertical integration or any kind of value addition. And of course, California comes with very tight regulatory frameworks on labor and environment. And so the idea and the vision we have is doing business in California could already set one apart from doing business in other parts of the world due to just the regulatory framework in which we find ourselves. That should be considered in many ways a bonus because it sets a high bar standard. That's our thinking around that. So this network, again, has designed these fiber pools. Those fiber pools we add value as close to home as we can. But the vision that I'd really love to show you, this map we have of California's, in fact, Joanne, I feel like I could probably get you this one slide that would help everybody in a nutshell, help this presentation just become really clear for people. So I'm going to share with you a slide that just shows you literally the gaps of our industry and what we're doing regionally to rebuild these gaps. Can you hear me now? The protein fibers are generally, we cannot do anything to those protein fibers at the base of the supply chain. We have a very hard time washing those materials even. We send greasy wool all the way to South Carolina to do that. We still have available cotton gins in the region. For bast fiber production, we currently have no decortication, no degumming. So here's a vision for those of you who might be interested in a slightly broader geography. Here's an analysis, a very simple graphic analysis of the Western US. Thank you so much, Joanne. So for wool, we do have an ability to industrially collect our wool. We have two massive wool pools, the Utah Wool Pool and Roswell Wool Pool. They help aggregate Rambouillet, which is a French merino, which is predominant in semi-arid regions in the Western US. We have very fine wool. In California alone, we have 900,000 pounds produced annually of 21 micron count and under. Again, where you see wool right there, when it comes to cleaning that material, we California and Western state wool from the very beginning, because it's early days in the value chain, and when you add so much artisanal price point to a raw commodity that early on, it makes the finished product pretty unattainable right now. But that's not a lack of wool, or not a lack of high quality wool, and not a lack of shearers, and not a lack of distribution and transportation capability or warehouses. It's an issue of washing. And then we have no industrial spinning. As you can see, as we move along and go horizontally across that row where the sheep is, we do have in Los Angeles, thank goodness, we still have this incredible industrial knitting scale. In the Western US, there's some level of industrial weaving for wool. It's kind of between artisan and industrial. And then we go to finishing, and again, we can do a lot of that work still within the Los Angeles garment worker community. And I think most of you know there's 45,000 garment workers in the greater Los Angeles area, recently protected from the piece rate by SB 62. Also a very powerful way to talk about labor and the justice-centered way in which California is engaging with textile labor. That should be, you know, a badge of honor for those doing work in Los Angeles, the fact that that legislation was passed. Cotton systems, again, we are famous for our long staple cotton in the state. We have industrial ways of harvesting. We have multi-million-dollar machines that go through and harvest. None of our cotton is hand-picked. Again, another labor badge of honor, I would say, for California. We have the ability to remove seed. We have the ability to warehouse it. We have the ability to access federal funds to pay growers if there's a lag time between the merchant aggregating that cotton and that cotton getting off to its next value chain partner. So there's actual protections, economic protections that grease the wheels for a frictionless cotton system in most cases, not in all cases, but in most. We have a huge gap in spinning. And then as we go forward, we do have, again, due to the Los Angeles community, we have knitting facilities that are at the industrial scale, mostly circular knitting systems, and a small amount of shimaseki and stole, three-dimensional or full garment creation. Knitting. And then you can just see, I could narrate the whole slide, but I just wanted you to see what's available here and how our organization, the slides I had prepared were about how we're addressing the gaps and how we're addressing the artisanal spaces and trying to ramp those up so that we have clean industrial throughput scale between all value-added partners. And we've been doing this work through providing technical assistance, legal, financial, engineering, and any kind of investment we're working on this year. We've started an integrated capital fibers fund with the Sustainable Ag Funders and Provenance Capital. So we're in the middle of doing some legal, and we will be starting our formal raise. We already have several $1 million committed. Our goal for the initial raise is $10 million to support filling in. It's a small sum, but it will help us do some initial work with our initial entrepreneurs who've been part of our TA for the last 2 years. And that TA, that technical assistance, again, has been engineering, financial, and legal. And we've been looking at things like democratic workplace in our legal TA. So how to develop structures that allow profit sharing, that allow people to feel invested in work. We're going to have to do business very differently in the new labor market. And so, working with democratic workplace structures is very important to us as we reinvest in California manufacturing. And then bast fibers, as you can see, and we all know, that's flax, that's, even nettle, that's milkweed, that's hemp. Those fibers have a huge role to play in the future. As co-product plants, plants that are used for other things, but then textile being a co-product, textile being a primary product is also possible if the price per pound was high enough. And so we are also looking at recruiting entrepreneurs in this space, because this space is, because it's been so underdeveloped and underinvested in bast fibers, we're really looking to see how we can support even a recruitment. There's great things going on in Alabama, North Carolina. There's a small hemp decortication system started in Kings County, California, but there's more work to be done there. And so anyway, just to say that this is a space where so many partners are involved, including the next speaker, Materia Evolve, Crystal Moody Wood. Excuse me, sorry, Crystal. She has been a key support in the wool value chain, which was our low-hanging fruit when we started this work. She has been able to move our California wool through VF Corporation, which was a very tall order, and she really pioneered that work in a way that allowed us to have viable, consumer-ready product from what started as greasy Rambouillet wool. The other piece that I wanted to say as I tee up Crystal is that a lot of the work that you see here, I was focused on our regional manufacturing initiative, but because California is such a rich raw material producer, a lot of our work has been focused on the ag side, the agricultural side, and working on restoring lost carbon stocks, working with biogeochemists, soil scientists, and technical service providers to make sure that all of that raw material is being grown climate smart in a monitored, measured, and scientific manner. So as that raw commodity enters the value chain, it comes with a greenhouse gas signature. It comes with an associated carbon farm plan for all ranches and farms involved. We really, I guess the benefit of having not a lot of this industry in its stronghold is that we get to reinvent it, and we get to do it the way that we would envision a future industry to look like. We have that opportunity. So that's what's exciting. And the last thing I'll say is the state of California is very interested in this work and combining their natural working lands climate goals, 20 million metric tons reduction, hopefully by 2030, and 100 million metric tons reduction by 2050 in working lands, and pairing that effort with circular economic goals that the state is holding. So how do we harness that political will that's coming now and move it into these reinvestments into an industry that we can all be really proud of? And again, an industry that's replicated across the world. I hope I didn't go over, because I know I had to talk over a bunch of slides, so I lost track of time a little bit, but I'll defer to Joanne on timing, and really excited to hear from Crystal next.
Thanks, Rebecca. We did have one question, and it'd be great to just take it right now. Is the gap in the cleaning of wool infrastructure because of the chemicals in the process have been banned in California?
No, good question though. But if we were to, I would imagine the base washing that we need to do is really degreasing, which requires soap. So that fortunately is possible to take effluent from the washing. We would take the lanolin and we would capture that and centrifuge the wastewater and collect lanolin and send that into the body care industry. And then if we had, the remaining effluent, in most parts of the world is used as irrigation for pasture for the animals that then are sheared and whose wool or protein fiber goes into the actual facility. So I've traveled throughout Europe and Asia, and I've seen how different facilities have worked on this. I would like to see a constructed wetland whereby some of the water is used for recharge of aquifer after it's biologically broken down, any of the remaining salts or things that were in the sheep sweat, actually. As those are remediated, I would love to see groundwater recharge, and I'd also like to see some level of it used in irrigation. I think what the last thing I'll say is about chlorine treatments. So if we were to superwash the wool, which would be to remove a certain amount of the scales, we we were, in our vision for a wool mill, we did not include superwash, but not to say that I did so because, or our team did so because we were worried about regulation. In fact, that's a really good question. We didn't evaluate it, but we also just weren't interested in the superwash component. We're more interested in blending the wool to soften it, blend it with our cottons, make old school viellas, blend it with bast fibers, make hemp wool blends. That was kind of the way we were thinking through removing the chlorine treatment, is through advanced plant blending strategies.
Thank you. So next up, our next speaker is Crystal Moody Wood, and we're really hoping she's able to share her screen.
All right. Now, can you all see my screen?
Uh-huh.
Okay, now I want to go to full, oh no, here, full screen. And we want presenter view. Great, amazing. Let's just go with that. Awesome. So I thought it would be great to start, since this is a California themed overview hosted by the California chapter of AATCC California. I'd provide a little bit of the recent history of the chapter itself. I had the privilege of serving on the sort of last chair and officer board, as Joanne was calling it. I was the sustainability pillar chair for 4 years. The California chapter had actually went on a 15-year hiatus before 2015 and was restarted and reinvigorated that year by Karen Mullen and Eva Reali and a bunch of very motivated California textile professionals who are excited to just start networking again and really seeing what the California textile industry had to offer. And you know, as we started meeting quarterly, the more we realized what our sort of aligned passion was, we all realized sustainability was at the core of what the education we wanted to see, the type of networking we wanted to do, and bringing together all these diverse groups that didn't just come from the textile industry, that represented nonprofit, represented academia, represented you know, various sectors that all intersected into sustainability work for California textile systems. And at the end of that 4-year, we did, you know, two-year chair roles. We ended up building ourselves up into a 3-day conference with the support of AATCC National. The chapter was actually able to hold a conference close to Monterey, California, a little town called Pacific Grove, at a beautiful conference ground that actually exists on a state park, the Asilomar State Park grounds. And we brought out brands, academia, nonprofit, a really diverse group of folks, all speaking to building resilient textile systems through the lens of soil and sea. And right about this time is when I was also deciding to start my own consultancy. I had been doing some independent work for a while, a lot of that work with Fibershed and Rebecca's group, really getting the climate beneficial wool program to a place where it was commercial and figuring out how to scale and really grow that effort. So I just say this to show the power that one, AATCC has, and two, the power a chapter can have to bring together a group of really diverse voices, really exciting information. I'm just thinking and reflecting on how much has changed since that conference, particularly in the green chemistry space. Joanne, you said today the PFAS bill is on the Senate floor, and it's really exciting to hear that. I really hope everything goes through. Rebecca, all the work that you have been doing. I've got pictures here of Nick Wenner, who represented FiberShed that day, speaking to Bass Fibers and actually taking everyone through a hands-on processing workshop, just to get those connections that we don't have unless our hands are in and on materials. So Joanne, you can move to the next one. I did want to introduce myself a little bit. So Crystal Moody Wood, founder and principal of Materivolve. We are a sustainable textiles consultancy based out of the San Francisco Bay Area. A lot of our work and clientele is in the California region. So, you know, thinking about what other things could have complemented what Rebecca had presented on and Joanne had presented on today, as far as what the industry looks like and all these exciting things happening in the materials innovation space and the green chemistry space. You know, we really could create another 3-day conference out of it, but I'll save you from that. Joanne's asked me to really give you a little bit of background and lead into an upcoming event that AATCC California has part sponsored and is a part of, and you all have the opportunity to have a discount code related to it. So we hope you all can join us. So Materivolve, San Francisco based, been around for almost 5 years now. And really, Joanne, you can advance to the next slide. Our vision is a materials world that stewards the health and wealth of all living systems, a world where science and creativity are in balance and where we can wear textiles that match our values. Next slide. We provide primarily textile consulting to a variety of clientele, mostly on the brand side, but it's been a lot more on the government side actually recently. I'll talk a little bit more about that later. Materials innovators, green chemical providers are also within our purview. Another of our most exciting services is experiential learning. So we take folks out on farms, a lot of times with our allies like FiberShed. We take folks out on boats and really use the environment as a way to inspire creativity, to inspire deeper connections to the material as well as to the people on board. And then we also provide educational speaking as needed. Next slide. So our focus is building regenerative textile systems through the lens of soil, sea, and circularity. On the soil side of things, FiberShed has been a really important ally for myself and for the consultancy. The California Cotton and Climate Coalition, she did not mention today, and that's a really important effort that you'll be hearing about hopefully in the media soon. There's a very close launch happening with multiple brands involved, technical providers, forward-thinking cotton farmers here in California. This is a really important effort for scaling those climate smart materials that Rebecca was talking about. In the sea lens, we've done a lot of work in the microfiber pollution world. We're expanding beyond that to really identify what are the most important topics for the ocean, for our waters, that we can support on. My colleague Carolyn Box is an ocean conservation consultant. She works on many of these projects with me. She comes with 20 years of plastic pollution experience and expertise. So we've I'll talk a little bit about the California specific efforts we've had together over the last few years. And then in the circularity world, really textile recycling, green chemistry, providing resources and connecting different diverse groups and supporting brands in particular on connecting the dots and building infrastructure and systems for re-commerce or recycling of goods. For really getting towards that circularity. Next slide. So to lead us up into the upcoming event, California, so Materivolve, the National Oceanic Atmospheric Association, National Oceanic and Atmospheric Association, NOAA, their marine debris program, and the National Marine Sanctuary Foundation all came together to plan an 85-person workshop that included, again, cross-sector, so academia, marine science, people from the policy side, and people from industry, all to talk about microfiber pollution. There's a lot of work and research going on with a microfiber focus, or fiber fragment focus, as some of us may like to call it, as a output of this workshop. My colleague Carolyn Box and I created a report called the California Microfiber Update, a Textile Perspective, that has it's a really great introductory document, but also gives a really good overview of what was happening in California in 2020, and still pretty fresh in what research is available. Next slide, Joanne. So it went through things like, you know, where there are some pain points, I think, for really getting diverse groups together and moving forward, and language being one of those things. So how do we define microfiber? Us as textile industry professionals have been using the term for a very long time, related to, you know, a specific subset of performance fibers, fibers that a size class that we integrate into products, a way of describing size and shape and characterizing materials. The ocean science world sort of backed into it from their work in microplastics that came from macroplastics. So it is still a size class, but you know, the two worlds do not translate at all with each other right now. So there are groups that are working on better translating this. Even within the ocean science world, there is not necessarily alignment on what exactly how to characterize the aspect ratio of the particle size, what it's made out of, for example. Traditionally synthetic, or for example, polyester has been the main focus of a lot of the microfiber pollution, but the science community is starting to open up and include natural and cellulosics, and really beginning to understand more about the fiber pollutions that are out there, or you know, more about what's out there that's not just synthetic derived, and then also the chemical additives associated with it. So this is a good basic description, and this is an example of what's in here. Joanne, next slide. It also goes through some really important research that happened here in San Francisco just a few years ago with the San Francisco Microplastics, San Francisco Bay Microplastics Project, led by the San Francisco Estuary Institute and 5 gyres. It suggested that stormwater systems made up of rivers, streams, and all other storm drains that empty into them contribute more than 7 trillion microplastics each year, 39% of those particles being microfibers. Quality control samples collected as part of the sample study that should have included no microplastics actually were found to include microfibers, suggesting that air is also an important pathway for microfibers to enter the environment. I think we hear a lot about laundering being a main source of that, but there's been a huge increase in research that has been happening even since 2020 on us understanding where microfibers and how they're moving through our environment, and what potential sources could look like. Both San Francisco Estuary Institute and 5 gyres, which is based out of Los Angeles, are each working on different projects to close those knowledge gaps around air transport and potential solutions like building stormwater infrastructure and major microplastic solutions like tires, or they're looking more into tires and road wear. Next slide. Now we're getting low on time. This was a map that we created also in this report of all the different academia and brands and research that was happening at the time for microfiber research. Many of these organizations are continuing to build their knowledge and their interest in understanding what's happening. We have such a strong coastline here in California, so a lot of interest there. Next slide. I did want to flag this. So because of the California efforts, the workshop, the report, we actually generated a lot of interest at the federal level. And there was an SOS 2.0, so the Save Our Seas Act 2.0 actually called out the need for a report on microfiber pollution at the federal level. So Materivolve for the last year and a half has been working with the EPA Trash Free Waters program and NOAA's Marine Debris program on a report on microfiber pollution. This includes a proposed definition for the federal level. This includes testing methodology, current research, potential solutions. And then also the past 6 months, we've been working with 30 plus federal agencies on a 5-year plan to address and reduce microfiber pollution. So that will be included in this report as well. And this report will go to Congress by the end of this year and is soon to be up for a public review next month. So if you'd like to be notified about this, please email me because I can put you on the list. It's a 30-day comment period. So this leads up, go ahead, Joanne, to skip to the next one. Leads up to the upcoming event that we are hosting along with AATCC as a sponsor, 2:30 p.m. October 27th. We're bringing textile folk, we're bringing ocean folk, Fiber Shed will be there. Hopefully Joanne will be there as well to really get folks together and talk about the most important issues that we see in ocean today. We'll have a manta trawl demo as seen here on the right, which is a microplastics research method, and really awesome hands-on ways of getting folks together and just making connections that weren't there before at the intersection of textiles and ocean. So thank you so much, Joanne, for having me. And yeah, I'm here for questions. And this is just a way to get in contact with me and with us.
Thank you so much, Crystal. Does anyone have any questions for Crystal, Rebecca, or I? Well, as Crystal mentioned, we do have this upcoming event in October, and we're really excited to offer this discount and to get everyone in person. We know that there's another webinar coming up in September for the California chapter on patents, and then we'll have a student mixer, but we really wanted to put a little effort into getting back in person. So it is going to be out of the Bay Area, and we really hope that some of the chapter members could make it. If you have any questions, we'll put our emails in the chat, and I hope everyone has a wonderful rest of your day and rest of your week. Thank you very much.
Oh, there's a question.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought that was the cleaning one again. Oh, okay. Do you capture fibers from different levels of the water column during your research? For Crystal.
So a lot of research that is out there today is surface level. My organization doesn't do any research. We're a single member LLC. So we really provide consulting support to connect the dots and help educate on the type of information that's out there. Out on the boat, we will see, so a manta trawl, it looks like a manta, actually sits on the surface, and it's not exactly the best method for microfiber capture. A lot of the subsequent methods that go along with the manta trawl are like more water column captures where they're measuring how low they're measuring at different levels that they're taking samples from the San Francisco Bay, for example. One thing to note, and what's interesting that some of you may know, if you think about the density of different fiber types, polyethylene, polypropylene, and polystyrene all sit sort of up at the top of the surface, and polyester tends to sink. So, you know, the levels that we know more about based on research today from surface sampling may not necessarily represent really well the rest of the water column itself. And then there's also sediment sampling, where things that sink all the way to the bottom and become adhered to organic material there's still a lot of research to understand and characterize, what's down there as well.
Well, if anyone else has any other questions, you can type it out, you can raise your hand, or you can just unmute yourself. And Heather says thank you. Give it another minute. If there's any questions, I don't want to rush anyone off. We still have another few minutes.
If helpful, I did end up just uploading that slide deck for you, Joanne, onto Google. And I don't know if anyone wants access to any of the, there's 3 main projects that are part of our Regional Manufacturing Initiative cohort of manufacturers that we'd like to get funding for. And so seeing those 3 projects is in that slide deck, and perhaps is interesting to those who are like, yeah, what are you doing about flax, wool, and cotton? And there's 3 projects in our cohort that are flax specific, wool specific, and cotton specific.
I can share those slides out with anyone who wants them. You can either contact me or Maria or anyone at the national chapter.